There are moments in life when everything shifts, when the world around you turns upside down without warning. It wasn't a fight or some dramatic revelation that changed things. It was something much quieter, much more sinister. It started on a regular Tuesday. At least, that's what I thought at the time. Just another evening in my routine. Come home from work, eat something, catch up on emails, then fall asleep. But that night, as I sat on the couch, half watching some random show, I noticed something. Her phone, sitting on the counter, had been vibrating constantly. Normally, I would have thought nothing of it. We both had our lives, our friends, our separate things. But this time, I couldn't help but notice the name flashing on the screen, Hank. It wasn't the name itself that caught my attention. It was the urgency in the messages. Every time the phone buzzed, she didn't pick it up. Instead, she kept glancing at it, like she was waiting for something, or maybe someone, to make the next move. I try not to think about it too much. I knew Clara had friends. I knew she worked with a lot of people. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. It was as if the phone was calling to me, taunting me with something I wasn't supposed to know. By the time the clock hit midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. I got up, walked over to the counter, and grabbed her phone. It was a simple act, nothing out of the ordinary. But as my thumb hovered over the screen, unlocking it, I realized I didn't have the right to do this. I'd never snooped before, never checked her messages or her calls. But tonight, something pushed me. There it was, clear as day. A conversation between Clara and Hank that went back for weeks. The messages were casual at first, just harmless jokes, but then they started to change. More frequent, more intimate. I miss you. I can't wait to see you. This has to be our little secret. My heart started pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure if I was more angry or hurt. But one thing was undeniable. I had just uncovered something that would shatter everything I thought I knew. I set the phone down, the weight of the discovery sinking in. How could she do this to me? How long had this been going on? The questions spiraled in my mind, faster than I could catch them. I waited. I waited for her to come back into the living room. But she didn't. She didn't even notice I was awake. The night stretched on, but all I could do was sit there, frozen in place, staring at the phone, and replaying every moment we'd spent together. Every time she said she loved me. Every time she smiled at me. Was it all a lie? Or was I just too blind to see what was happening right under my nose? Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked out of the house. The cold air hit me like a slap in the face as I stepped outside. My car was parked in the driveway, but I didn't even bother to get in. I just walked. The quiet of the night surrounded me, the streets empty and desolate. I kept walking, no particular destination in mind, just trying to outrun the thoughts racing through my head. How could I confront her? How could I even begin to explain what I had discovered? I didn't know the answers. What I did know was that my entire life had just been turned upside down by a single, simple truth. Clara wasn't who I thought she was. And from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. As I stood there on the sidewalk, trying to wrap my head around everything, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half hoping it was some sort of message from her, some explanation, some apology. But it wasn't. It was a text from Hank. And all it said was, "I miss you more than you know." I didn't respond to Hank's message. What was there to say? I already knew too much, and yet, it felt like nothing. I was empty, frozen, standing outside my own life, staring in from the cold. The streets felt like a different world now. It was the middle of the night, but my mind refused to shut off. Every time I closed my eyes, all I saw were those messages, those sweet nothings between Clara and Hank, like the broken pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that I'd just begun to see for the first time. I couldn't go back home. Not like this. Not with the anger and confusion swirling in my chest. I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets that seemed to mock me with their calm. I ended up by the river, parked in an empty lot overlooking the water. The city lights reflected off the surface, creating a shimmering glow that only made the darkness feel deeper. What was happening to me? To us? How had we gotten here? My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Clara, her name flashing on the screen. I hesitated. I couldn't answer it. If I did, I knew I wouldn't be able to keep my emotions in check. So I let it ring. I sat there in the car, staring out at the river, trying to piece together the last few weeks. The break she had mentioned now seemed like a calculated move. She didn't want space. She wanted freedom. Freedom from me. from everything we built. But the question lingered. Why? Why would she do this to me? To us? After a while, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the phone, unlocked it, and read through the messages again. Hank had sent another text, just a short one. Let's keep this between us, okay? The finality of it hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't some random flirtation or a harmless fling. This was something planned. They were speaking in codes, making sure there were no mistakes. No slip-ups. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't some one-time mistake. This had been going on for months, hidden behind our daily lives, masked by the mundane things we talked about in the evenings. The same evenings where I had laughed with her, where I had shared everything with her, and she had smiled back, pretending like nothing was wrong. How could I have missed it? How could I have been so blind? I felt betrayed. But worse than that, I felt stupid. I had trusted her. I had trusted us. We were supposed to be partners, but now I was left holding the shattered pieces of a life I thought was real. How long had she been lying to me? How many moments had I shared with her, completely unaware that she was already planning her exit? I needed to confront her. I couldn't let this fester any longer. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know the truth. The anger, the disbelief, it was eating me alive. But what was I supposed to say? What was the right thing to do when the foundation of everything you thought you knew was built on lies? I drove back home. This time, the house didn't feel like a home. It felt like a place I no longer belonged. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a minute, staring at the front door. It was quiet, too quiet. The silence was suffocating. I walked inside and froze. Clara wasn't on the couch. She wasn't in the kitchen or in her office. She was nowhere. I walked through the rooms, calling her name, but there was no answer. My heart started racing. Where could she be at this hour? The door to our bedroom was ajar, and that's when I saw it. The faint glow of her phone on the nightstand. It was still unlocked. I picked it up, almost without thinking, my fingers trembling as I swiped through the messages once again. There was a new one. This time, from Clara herself. It wasn't directed at Hank, but it might as well have been. I need to see you tonight. It's getting harder to keep this quiet. My stomach dropped. My hands were shaking. I had to do something. I had to confront her. I stood there, phone in hand, unsure of what would happen next. Would she walk in and deny everything? Would she try to explain herself away, tell me it was a mistake? Or would she just admit it, tell me the truth I had already known for hours but had refused to face? I didn't want to wait any longer. My feet moved before my mind could catch up. I headed for the door, ready to confront her, to demand the truth. But then, just as I reached for the door handle, I heard it, the sound of keys jingling outside. Clara. She was home. My heart skipped a beat as I tried to steady myself. What was I going to say? How was I going to react? I couldn't just pretend I didn't know, but what if I was wrong? What if it was all some misunderstanding? No, I had seen the messages. The truth was staring me in the face. The door creaked open, and Clara stepped inside, her eyes catching mine for the briefest moment. For a split second, I saw it. The hesitation, the guilt, the shame in her eyes. But then she quickly masked it, replacing it with that practiced smile of hers. Hey, she said, her voice soft but distant. You're up late. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, holding the phone in my hand, trying to decide what to do next. This was it. The moment everything would change. Clara, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. We need to talk. Her smile faltered for just a second. What about? I took a deep breath, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. About Hank. And everything else. Her face went pale. I watched as she opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time in a long time, I could see the cracks in her perfect facade. The silence that followed my words was deafening. Clara stood in the doorway, her eyes widening as she processed what I had just said. There was no denying it, no avoiding the truth any longer. She knew. I knew. It was out in the open now, hanging between us like a thick fog that neither of us could see through. Her mouth opened, closed, and then opened again, as if she were trying to find the right words. But nothing came. I could feel her panic, her desperate search for an escape route, and yet there was nowhere to run. I didn't need her to admit it. I already knew everything. The messages, the lies, the late-night phone calls that she'd tried so hard to keep from me. I had seen it all, every word, every stolen moment. It wasn't a matter of forgiveness anymore. It was a matter of facing what had been ripped apart. And in that moment, I realized that this was no longer about us. This was about her, about the choices she had made that had led her to this point. Clara, please, I said, the words coming out softer than I had intended. Just tell me the truth. It's over, isn't it? She stepped into the room, her body language guarded, almost defensive. I noticed how she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her gaze darting to the floor before meeting my eyes for just a brief moment. It was as if she were trying to steel herself for something, but she couldn't. The guilt was written all over her face, and for a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I don't know what you want me to say, she finally replied, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I laughed bitterly, not out of humor, but out of the sheer absurdity of it all. You didn't mean for it to happen? Clara, you've been talking to him for months. You didn't mean for it to happen? Her face turned pale, and I could see the tears beginning to well up in her eyes. She was trying to hold it together, but it was clear she had no idea how to deal with the mess she had created. Please, just let me explain, she said, her voice small, almost desperate. But I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. What was there to explain? The lies? The betrayal? The fact that the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with everything, had been living a double life behind my back. Explain? I echoed, my voice growing louder with frustration. What could you possibly explain, Clara? The messages? The secrecy? The fact that you've been lying to me for God knows how long. How long were you planning to keep this going? She took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to face what was coming. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how to stop it once it started. Hank, he was someone I could talk to. He understood me in ways that... I cut her off before she could finish. So that's it. You didn't feel like you could talk to me anymore? That's your excuse? She flinched at my words, and for a moment, I almost regretted it. But the anger was too much. The pain was too fresh. How many times had I been there for her, listening, supporting her through everything, only for her to turn around and find someone else to confide in? How could I not feel betrayed? I don't know, okay, she whispered, her voice breaking. It just happened. I don't know how. It was never supposed to go this far. The vulnerability in her voice almost made me soften, but I couldn't. I wouldn't. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a choice. And she had made that choice. Again and again. Don't tell me you didn't know how it went this far. You didn't just wake up one day and decide to cheat on me, I said, my voice shaking with the intensity of my emotions. You made that choice every single time you texted him, every time you spoke to him behind my back. Don't you dare try to act like you didn't know what you were doing. Her face crumpled, the weight of my words hitting her harder than I expected. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The truth was, I didn't care anymore about her reasons, her apologies, her explanations. The truth was, everything had been shattered. And no matter what she said now, it didn't change the fact that I had been living in a lie. The foundation of everything we had built together, our marriage, our life, had crumbled into dust, and there was no way to put it all back together. You know, Clara, I said, my voice finally quieting, the anger ebbing away but leaving a deep sadness in its place. I loved you. I loved you more than you'll ever understand. But this isn't something you come back from. This isn't something you fix with words. I didn't wait for her to respond. I didn't want to hear it. I walked past her, ignoring the tears in her eyes, the way she was calling my name, begging me to listen. I didn't have to listen anymore. The truth had already been told. I walked out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest, and closed the door behind me. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. I couldn't stay in a place where every corner reminded me of a life that no longer existed. I grabbed my coat, my keys, and stepped out into the night, not knowing where I was going, just knowing that I had to leave. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, I was done. And as I walked away from the home I once knew, I felt something shift in me, something I wasn't ready to face, but something that was undeniable. The truth had set me free, but it had also destroyed everything I thought I knew. The days after that night blurred together like a series of disconnected images. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt truly awake, as if I were drifting through life without a sense of purpose or direction. The house, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now felt like a tomb, a cold, empty space that reminded me of everything I had lost. I tried to keep busy, but the more I distracted myself, the more I realized that I was just avoiding the inevitable. I had to face Clara, again. There was no running from it. The morning after our confrontation, I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, the way she had looked at me when I called her out, the tears in her eyes, the way she had pleaded with me to understand. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand how someone I loved so deeply could betray me so completely. It wasn't just the affair, it was everything. The lies, the secrecy, the quiet, deliberate choices she had made to push me further away. I needed answers. Real answers. Not the half-hearted explanations she had given me that night. I had given her space. I had tried to give her the opportunity to come clean on her own terms, but it had only led to more silence, more distance between us. It felt like the calm before the storm, but I was done waiting. I finally decided to go home that evening, to face her one more time, to see if there was anything left of the woman I thought I knew. The house was eerily quiet when I entered, just like before. It felt like the air had thickened, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Clara was sitting on the couch in the living room, her eyes red from crying. She looked up when I walked in, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could fix this. But I wasn't sure it was something that could be fixed anymore. Clara, I began, my voice unsteady, but determined. We need to talk about this. We need to face it head on. I can't keep pretending like everything is fine. She nodded slowly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I know. I've been thinking about that too. But I don't know where to start. I don't know how to explain something that feels so wrong, something I wish I could undo. I took a deep breath. You can't undo it, Clara. You can't take back the lies, the betrayal. What you've done, it's changed everything. It's not just about what happened with Hank. It's about everything. How long was I living in this illusion? Her eyes filled with fresh tears as she looked down at her hands. She wasn't even trying to look at me anymore, not directly. I didn't want to hurt you. You have to believe me. I never wanted to hurt you. But it wasn't about what she wanted anymore. You did hurt me, Clara, I said, my voice cold. And you don't get to decide what I feel or how I process this. You lost that right when you made the choice to betray me. She flinched at my words, but I couldn't stop. I had to say it. I had to get it all out. You've been lying to me for months, Clara. And I didn't even know. I didn't even know that you were slipping away. That's the part one can't wrap my head around. How could you stand there every day, pretending like everything was fine, when all along, you were thinking about someone else? She finally looked up at me then, and I could see the shame in her eyes, deep, like a wound she couldn't hide. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she whispered. It was a mistake. Hank, he made me feel alive again. I felt like I was losing myself, like I wasn't the person I was supposed to be. But I swear to you, it was never about you. I don't know what happened. I don't know how to explain it. I could feel my anger rising again, but I held it in, just barely. I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear her explanations anymore. I wasn't sure I cared. She had already crossed a line, and the more she talked, the more I realized that nothing she could say would change what had already been done. I had loved her, and now I was standing there, unsure if I even knew who she was anymore. I don't want your explanations, I said quietly. I just need to know one thing. Was it worth it? Was Hank worth it? The question hung in the air, and for a long moment, she didn't respond. Her hands trembled in her lap, and I could see the internal struggle waging inside her. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know what I was looking for. But now it's too late. There it was. The truth. The admission I had been waiting for, but didn't want to hear. Yeah, I said, my voice tight. It is too late. We both sat there in the silence, the weight of the words between us heavy and suffocating. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if there was a next. All I knew was that the person I had once known, the person I had shared my life with, was gone. And no matter how many apologies she offered, no matter how much she cried or begged for forgiveness, nothing would change that. I stood up then, my legs shaky, and walked toward the door. I could feel her eyes on me, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. As I opened the door, I heard her voice again, desperate, pleading. Please don't leave me. Don't walk away from us. I paused for a second, just long enough for her words to hit me like a wave. But I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I already have, I said, my voice breaking with the finality of it. And then I walked out. The door clicked shut behind me, and I stood there for a long moment on the other side. I could hear her sobbing through the walls, but I didn't move. I didn't go back. I had made my choice. And now, there was no going back. The sound of Clara's sobs echoed through my mind as I walked away, each step heavier than the last. I could hear her calling my name, the desperation in her voice like a knife in my chest, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. There was no going back now. Not after everything that had happened, not after seeing the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, break before my very eyes. I didn't know where I was going, or even what I was hoping to find. My feet carried me through the streets, the city lights blurring into a smear of colors that matched the chaos in my mind. I had always been the kind of person who kept things to himself, who tried to fix problems on my own without involving anyone else. But this was different. This was something I couldn't fix. Not by myself. Not with a phone call or a long conversation. I had been betrayed, and no amount of talking would change that. I found myself standing in front of a bar, one I used to frequent when I first moved into the city. It was small, dimly lit, with the kind of unpretentious atmosphere that always made me feel like I could be anyone. I pushed the door open, the bell above it chiming softly as I stepped inside. The familiar smell of whiskey and stale beer hit me like a punch, and for a moment, I almost felt like I could disappear into the haze of the place, leave everything behind, and never look back. But I didn't. I walked up to the bar and ordered a drink, my mind still racing. Every time I tried to focus on something, Clara's face appeared in my thoughts, her tear-streaked eyes pleading with me to stay. But I knew better. I had given her everything, and she had thrown it away for something that wasn't even real. I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to be the guy who had to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. But that's what I was now, and there was no escaping it. The bartender, a guy named Mike who had always been friendly with me, slid my drink across the counter and looked me over. He could probably see the storm brewing in my eyes. "You look like you've had a rough night, man," he said, his voice low but knowing. "Yeah, you could say that," I muttered, taking a sip of the whiskey. It burned, but it didn't make me feel any better. It didn't numb the ache in my chest, the one that had been growing ever since that night I found out the truth. "You want to talk about it?" Mike asked, leaning against the bar, his arms crossed. He wasn't the type to push, but he could tell when someone needed to unload. I shook my head, staring into my glass. "I don't even know where to start." "Fair enough," Mike said. He didn't push me any further, and for that, I was grateful. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk. I did, more than anything, but I wasn't ready to voice the words yet. The pain was still too fresh, the anger too real. I finished my drink in silence, feeling like an outsider in my own life. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a split second, I thought it was Clara. Maybe she had finally figured out how to make it right. But when I pulled it out, I saw a text from an unknown number. I opened the message with a sense of dread, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hey, it's Hank. We need to talk. I think you deserve to know the full truth." My blood ran cold. The full truth? What the hell was that supposed to mean? It felt like everything was spinning faster now, like the walls were closing in on me. First Clara had lied, and now Hank wanted to add more layers to this already twisted mess? I stared at the screen for a long moment, the words blurring together, as if they weren't real. Maybe it was some kind of sick joke. Maybe he was playing games, trying to get inside my head. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had to hear what he had to say. I couldn't move on without knowing everything. What was he going to tell me? Was there more to Clara's betrayal that I didn't know? I had already felt the bottom drop out of my world. What more could he possibly do to make it worse? I tapped out a quick reply. "Meet me at the bar in an hour. I'm done playing games." I didn't expect him to show up. In fact, part of me didn't want him to. I wasn't sure I was ready to hear whatever he had to say, but I had to know. I had to know what this man, this stranger who had destroyed my life, was going to say. I paid for my drink and sat at the back of the bar, waiting. The minutes stretched on, each one heavier than the last. Every time the door opened, I looked up, half expecting Clara to walk through. But it wasn't her. It was just people coming in for their own reasons, oblivious to the storm that was raging inside me. I stared into my glass again, the whiskey burning, the edges of my thoughts growing fuzzy. I wanted to forget. I wanted to let go, just for a minute. But I couldn't. Not with Hank's text still fresh in my mind. An hour passed, then an hour and a half. Still no sign of Hank. I was starting to think he had backed out when I heard the door swing open behind me. I turned around, expecting the usual crowd, but instead, it was him. Hank. He walked into the bar with a casual swagger, like nothing was wrong. Like nothing had happened. He spotted me immediately and walked over, sitting down across from me without saying a word. I didn't know what to expect from him, but what I didn't expect was for him to look so normal, so calm. For a moment, we just sat there, staring at each other. I could feel the tension building between us, the unspoken animosity. Finally, Hank broke the silence. "So," he said, his voice steady but laced with something I couldn't quite place. "You want to know the full truth, huh?" I nodded, my pulse racing. "Yeah, I want to hear it all. I want to know what's really been going on." He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing slightly. "All right, here's the thing. Clara wasn't the only one lying." My heart stopped. Hank's words hit me like a tidal wave, crashing over everything I had thought I knew. "Clara wasn't the only one lying," he said again, his voice low and almost mocking. For a moment, I couldn't process what he was saying. Was he trying to say that I, too, was part of this? That somehow I had been complicit in the betrayal, in the lies, in the mess that had unfolded between us? I stared at him, my mind racing to make sense of his words. Was he trying to manipulate me, play mind games? Had he come here to taunt me, to make me feel small for everything that had happened? Or was he finally going to tell me something that might, just might, explain the chaos that had consumed my life in the past few days? "Are you serious?" I finally said, my voice hoarse from a mix of disbelief and anger. "What the hell are you talking about?" Hank didn't flinch. He just leaned back in his chair, casually swirling the drink in his hand, as if he were having a conversation about the weather. He was too calm, too collected. It made my blood boil. "Look, I'm not here to make you feel better," Hank said, his eyes narrowing. "I'm here to tell you what you need to hear. Clara and I, this thing we've been doing, it wasn't just about the physical stuff. It wasn't just about sex or whatever else you're thinking. It was deeper than that. But here's the part that'll really get to you. Clara never wanted to leave you. Not really." I could feel my stomach twist. The way he said it, with that smug smile, made me want to throw my drink in his face. But I forced myself to stay still, to keep listening. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "She didn't want to leave me? Then why did she do it? Why did she keep seeing you behind my back if she didn't want to leave?" Hank shrugged, his eyes locked on mine. "Because she was scared. Scared of you. Scared of what she was losing, but too comfortable to do anything about it. I didn't push her into anything, man. She came to me. She started seeking me out, asking for attention, for something she wasn't getting from you." The words cut through me like a blade. I wasn't sure what to feel. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw him out of my life completely, but another part of me was confused. Was this the truth? Was Clara truly that unhappy? Was that the real reason she'd chosen to betray me, rather than just admitting that something had been missing? "Don't act like you're some kind of savior, Hank." I shot back, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You're not some hero in this story. You're just as guilty as she is. You didn't have to let this go as far as it did. You could have walked away at any point." Hank's face hardened for a moment, the cocky attitude slipping for just a second. "Yeah, I get it. I'm not a saint. But I didn't come here to talk about who's more at fault. I came to tell you something that you clearly don't understand yet." I leaned forward, the tension between us so thick I could barely breathe. "What is it, then? What else could you possibly have to say to me that'll change anything?" He paused, then his voice dropped, almost as if he were sharing a secret. "Clara came to me because she was already checking out of your marriage. She was emotionally distant long before she ever started the affair. She wasn't looking for another guy. She was looking for a way to feel alive again, for a way to feel wanted." His words hung in the air like a heavy fog, suffocating everything around us. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to punch him. Another part of me wanted to scream at Clara. How could she have let it go this far? How could she have fallen so far out of love with me that she had to turn to someone else to feel alive again? I clenched my fists, feeling the rage building up inside of me. But I couldn't stop myself from asking the question that had been gnawing at me since I first found out. How long was it going on? How long were you two seeing each other? Hank took a deep breath and looked me in the eyes, as if measuring me up, deciding just how much truth I could handle. "A few months. Longer than you think. But here's the thing. Man, Clara's not the only one who was playing games. You weren't exactly present in your own marriage either. I froze, the words crashing into me like a punch to the gut. What are you talking about? I was there. I was always there. I did everything for her. For us. Hank shook his head slowly. You were there physically, but not emotionally. You were too busy with your own stuff, your work, your projects. Clara needed someone to talk to, someone who actually listened. And for a long time, she didn't feel like she could turn to you. I could feel the room spinning, as if the ground beneath me was slipping away. Was that what had happened? Had I been so absorbed in my own life, in my own ambitions, that I failed to see what Clara was going through? I had been so focused on keeping everything together that I hadn't noticed the cracks forming around me. The cracks in her. You're wrong, I whispered, my voice trembling. I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't know. I thought everything was fine. Hank looked at me with a mixture of pity and something else, something I couldn't quite place. You didn't know because you weren't looking. And now you're here, trying to pick up the pieces of something that's already broken. The words hit me harder than I thought possible. It felt like a punch to the gut, knocking all the breath out of me. For the first time, I realized just how much responsibility I had in this. I had been so busy trying to hold everything together, so focused on my own success, that I had let Clara slip away. And now, there was no going back. For a long time, we both sat in silence, neither of us knowing what to say next. Hank had done what he came to do. He had told me the truth, or at least part of it. But the more he spoke, the more I realized that the truth was messy, complicated, and far worse than I could have imagined. And now, the real question was, what do I do with this truth? The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. Hank's words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. I had been so focused on Clara's betrayal, on the way she had torn apart everything I thought I knew about our marriage, that I hadn't taken a moment to look at myself. I had been so caught up in work, in the never-ending demands of life, that I had neglected her. I had neglected us. The weight of that realization hit me like a truck, and for a moment, I felt like I couldn't breathe. Hank didn't say anything more, just sat there watching me, waiting for something. Waiting for me to process the flood of emotions that had just been unleashed. The anger, the hurt, the confusion, they were all battling inside of me, fighting for dominance. I didn't know what to do with any of it. I didn't know how to process the fact that the woman I had loved, the woman I had spent years of my life with, had been slipping away from me for months, and I hadn't even noticed. I slammed my fist against the table, the sharp sound of it reverberating through the bar, making the few patrons in the corners look up in surprise. Hank didn't flinch. He just stared at me, his face unreadable, waiting for me to let it all out. Why? I finally asked, my voice hoarse, barely more than a whisper. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you just walk away if you knew she wasn't happy? Why drag me into this mess? Hank took a slow sip from his drink, as if he were considering his answer carefully. It's not that simple, man. Clara didn't want to walk away. She didn't want to hurt you. But she wasn't happy, and she didn't know how to fix it. So she came to me. Not for sex, not for some fling, but because I was someone who listened. I was someone who made her feel something again. And the more she pulled away from you, the closer I got. I could feel my stomach churn as his words sank in. It wasn't about the physical attraction for Clara. It wasn't even about cheating in the traditional sense. No, this was about emotional neglect, about the fact that I had been so focused on everything else that I had failed to see her. I had failed to see the cracks forming, to see the warning signs that she was slipping through my fingers. I didn't even know. I whispered, the words barely audible as they left my mouth. I didn't even see it. I thought everything was fine. I thought we were fine. You were never fine, Hank said, his voice steady but full of a quiet understanding that stung even more than his words. You were drifting. She was drifting. And neither of you knew how to stop it. So she found me. I could feel the ground beneath me shift, like I was being pulled under by the weight of everything he was saying. I had been so blind, so caught up in the daily grind of life that I hadn't seen what was slipping away right in front of me. I thought I was doing the right thing, keeping everything together, managing everything. But in reality, I was losing her, and I hadn't even realized it. I didn't deserve this, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. None of this is fair. I gave her everything. Hank leaned forward, his eyes locking with mine. It's not about fairness, man. It's about what was happening between you two. You were giving her everything, but not what she really needed. And Clara wasn't strong enough to tell you that. She wasn't strong enough to ask for more. So she did what she thought was the only way to feel alive again. She came to me. I felt a surge of anger flood through me. The anger wasn't just at Clara, or Hank, or even myself. It was at the whole damn situation. How had we ended up here? How had we gone from a happy couple, two people who once knew each other inside and out, to this? To betrayal, lies, and secrets? It wasn't just the affair that was eating me up. It was the realization that I had failed, that I had neglected her in ways I hadn't even seen. But I couldn't stay in this place anymore. I couldn't keep replaying the same mistakes over and over in my mind. I needed to act. I needed to take control of my own life again, before I let this situation consume me completely. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Hank looked up at me, surprised, as I grabbed my jacket off the back of my chair. "I've heard enough," I said, my voice low and final. "I don't need to hear any more. I know what I need to do now." Hank opened his mouth as if he was going to say something more, but then he closed it, as if he knew there was nothing else left to say. I walked out of the bar, the cool night air hitting me like a slap in the face. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was going to do next. But I knew one thing. I couldn't stay in that place anymore. I couldn't stay in the past, in the anger and the confusion. I had to make a choice. I had to choose to move forward, to stop being a victim of my own life. I had to take control of my own future, even if it meant walking away from everything I thought I knew, even if it meant leaving Clara behind. The road ahead was unclear, the future uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a small spark of hope. Maybe it was the hope of starting over, of rebuilding my life from the ground up. Maybe it was the hope that I could learn from my mistakes and never make them again. But whatever it was enough to keep me moving, enough to keep me from turning back. As I walked into the night, I didn't look back. And for the first time in days, I felt like I was taking my life back. The night air was cool against my skin, and for the first time in days, I felt something other than the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me. I didn't know where I was going, but for once, it didn't matter. I wasn't running from the past. I was walking towards something new, something better. I'd spent so much time stuck in the aftermath, wrapped up in the mess that Clara and I had created, that I hadn't given myself permission to think about what came next. What would it be like to be free of all the lies, the pain, the heartache? What would it feel like to rebuild, to find myself again after everything had shattered? I didn't have the answers yet. Hell, I didn't even know if I could forgive Clara, if I could ever look at her the same way again. But I knew one thing. I was done being the victim of my own life. I was done staying stuck in a story that wasn't mine to tell anymore. I stopped at a park near my apartment, the place where I used to come when I needed space, when I needed to clear my mind. I sat on one of the benches, looking up at the stars above, feeling the cool breeze brush against my face. It was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. I didn't have to have everything figured out right now. I didn't need to know exactly how I was going to heal or how long it would take, but I knew that I would. I had to. I had to believe that there was something better waiting for me, something real, something worthy of the time and energy I had to offer. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, my fingers hesitating over the screen for a moment. There were 100 different texts I could have sent, messages to Clara, questions, demands, explanations. But instead, I opened a new text, one I hadn't thought I'd send just a few hours ago. "Hey, Mike. It's been a while. You free for a beer? I could use a friend." I hit send and leaned back on the bench, letting the cool air fill my lungs, letting the weight of the past start to fade away. I didn't need to carry it anymore. I wasn't going to let it define me. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a response. "Always, man. You know where to find me." I smiled, a genuine smile, the first I'd had in days. And just like that, I felt a little lighter, a little freer. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that the first step to healing was going to be getting out of my head and into the world again. I had friends. I had my life ahead of me. And for the first time, I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's mistakes. I stood up from the bench, taking a deep breath. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. It might not even be clear. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. A path that would lead me back to myself. A path that was mine to walk. And as I walked toward the bar, towards something that felt like hope, I knew one thing for sure. I was going to be okay.